Hello, brilliant souls. Welcome to Rainbows in Real Life, the show dedicated to bringing positivity to the forefront, celebrating the power and promise of the human spirit, and supporting each other in challenging times. We believe when we join together, we all live better lives, and we're exploring ways we can do that in today's ever-changing world. I'm Pamela Aubrey, and I'm here with my amazing co-host, Christopher Rush, the No Excuses Coach, and our special guest, John Finch, author of The Father Effect. And on this episode, we're talking about the importance of fathers in the lives of their children. So welcome to the show, guys.
What's happening, beautiful people?
Hey.
Welcome. So great to have you guys on. Thank you, John, for being with us tonight. Such a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So I kind of want to jump in because I know you have an incredible story and you have a lot to share with our listeners tonight. So I want to give you the opportunity, make sure we have plenty of time to get into all that. But first, I want you to tell us just a little bit about you and, where you grew up. What was your life like growing up? And, how did it sort of start this whole journey for you?
Well, I am a Texas boy, not born and bred. I got here as quick as I could, as they say. But I was born in Mississippi, moved to Texas when I was about 3 years old, and grew up. My dad, we had three boys, or my parents had three boys, so I have two older brothers. My dad, unfortunately, committed suicide when I was 11, and that's kind of what starts my story and journey.
Yeah.
But grew up with a single mom from that point on, and so I have a soft spot for single moms and the struggles and trials that they go through. And I myself have been married 26 years now. I have three daughters that are just such blessings and just really teach me probably more than I could ever teach them almost on a daily basis. So I'm pretty blessed, dude.
Love that. Wow. And I know we're just, kind of scratching the surface of all the things that happened over those years while you were growing up and what led to, the decision that your father made. But I'd like you to, go back just a little bit and tell us what was going on in those years, as you were growing up, and what were you experiencing and what was happening with your dad that ultimately led him to make that choice?
Yeah, so there's quite a bit of background about my father that we tell a little bit in the movie about and a little bit in the book, but not kind of the whole story. But my dad grew up, in an environment that wasn't the most healthy. His mom was married 5 times, never had a stable father figure, was raised mostly by his grandmother, so really struggled to know what it looked like to be a real man, right? And a healthy, good man. And so because of that, he struggled in so many different areas just because he didn't know how to be a dad, didn't have it modeled for him, had never seen it done. And so that, or a husband, right? So he struggled in both of those areas like a lot of us do and have.
Yes.
Because of that, I remember growing up and I have faint memories of spending little bits and pieces of time with him, but he was gone a lot, always kind of just not around.
Yeah.
And so when he was there, I think he was very kind of caught up in his own stuff, in his own junk that he was having to deal with.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the way, as I was newly born, I was about 1 year old, he got wrapped up with organized crime. And long story short, got involved in counterfeiting and ended up getting busted, went to prison. And while he was in prison, was going back and testifying against some of these people. And as a result, was let out a little earlier than expected. And that's when we moved to Texas to kind of start a new life. So there's bits and pieces that I remember of my father. And it's been so long. It was 1979 when he died. So it seems as if I've lived like these two lives, right?
Sure.
One that I very much remember, but one that's very distant and kind of a faded memory when I was growing up with him.
Well, and I think, your point that a lot of us have grown up either with absentee fathers or fathers that were there but weren't really present with us is such a common story. I mean, I feel like that's the majority of people, really. And that's why I feel like the show is so important. I mean, I know Christopher, grew up with a single mom. My son has lived with me, part-time, did for many years, but his father left when he was 12. And so, a lot of those like growing middle teenage years and growing up into adulthood years, he was didn't really have that father figure in place. And I think that's just so much more common, than it used to be. And there's definitely, an impact and effect that has. And so I want to be able to talk about that a little bit. And I'd love for you to just share a little bit about your book and, some of what you've learned along your own journey, and not just your own journey, but also in working with the individuals that you work with.
Yeah. So, the epidemic of fatherlessness is something, as I started my story about 11 years ago, found forgiveness from my father, and that's what radically changed my life. As I started this journey, started sharing my story with others, it was everybody else had a story. And I was like, wow, really? And so everybody I talked to, it was an epidemic much bigger than I ever imagined as I started making the movie and interviewing all these various people. And so most people think of absent fathers of being physical, but I think sometimes even more damaging can be the fathers that are there physically but are absent emotionally. It's the dad that lives right there in the home but chooses to spend other time doing other things rather than engaged with his kids. And so it is to this day. We started making the movie 11 years ago. Even to this day, I see it, and it's not socioeconomic related. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're poor, if you're rich, and everything in between. As fathers, as men, we tend to get caught up in things. We get distracted. And so what I know and what I've learned through the years is there's a lot of really mad men out there. The guys are angry, and they can't even tell you why they're angry. I mean, honestly, you see the anger, especially now in the very polarized society,
right?
Politically and socially and everything else we're dealing with. It's the anger's coming out like it's never come out before. And people are just dying to lash out at people. And it's becoming more and more obvious now,
right?
More so in the past, but it's the anger that I see. And it's not only in men, but it's also in women. Women show it differently than men, but it's that underlying theme of anger because of abandonment or betrayal or whatever it might be with your father. And so men and women show it differently. They respond differently. Women, as we interviewed for the film, a lot of women become very promiscuous because they're just looking for love, some kind of affection from a father that they didn't get from their own dad, right?
Right.
Which very often leads to a very abusive relationship because they're gonna fall in love with the first man that shows them attention. And guys are smart. They know the girls that have daddy issues, and they're gonna play to that. With dads or with men, it becomes, well, I'm going to be super successful at work because I want to show my old man that I can do it on my own, or I don't need to be successful. So then you have the guys that are so they're so absorbed in their work that they're not paying attention to their kids. And with me, it was a combination of that. Plus I was an alcoholic. I was medicating this wound of abandonment and betrayal because I didn't really want to deal with it. I just wanted to pretend it wasn't there. So that's how I coped with it.
Thank you for so much for sharing that, man. I wanted to go back to something you said earlier that has massive impact, but you kind of went over it really, really quick. You said you found forgiveness for your dad. Talk to us about that process of finding forgiveness, because I know that's something that as a coach, I deal with that a lot in people trying to find forgiveness or empathy for their parents that have done past indiscretions. So how did you find forgiveness, and walk us through that process?
Yeah. So, for me, it literally was, I'd gotten to a place in my life where I was just a nightmare. I was an absolute train wreck. My world was just falling apart. My marriage wasn't good. I wasn't the dad I needed to be. I was living in this environment from a job perspective where it was like the perfect storm. I had an unlimited expense account. I was an alcoholic. So I was the guy that would walk in the bars and buy a round of drinks, on me type thing, right? And I was hanging out with a lot of guys that were alcoholics. So wasn't a good environment. Well, I had started to kind of piece some things together. And really, I'm a man of faith. God started doing some work in me to show me that, man, I was pretty jacked up, right? I'm still jacked up to this day, but not nearly as bad. But it was really just, man, I had this father thing, right? And I'd been introduced it to a friend of mine on a golf course. I'd just been sharing with him some of the stuff I was going through. And at one point he turned to me and said, "You grew up without a dad, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And I went on and gave him this 10-minute explanation about how amazing my mom was.
Mm.
But then when I finished, he said, "But was she a dad?" And I just like, whoa, hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
So that's what really started me on this journey of, okay, I've got this father wound thing. I know it. And I know my behavior, my drinking and all the stupid stuff I'm doing. It's not making sense. And I think this father wound has something to do with it. So literally, dude, I said, okay, I'm all in. I got to see a counselor. I got to start processing this. I got to start walking through this with a professional. And it sucked, dude. It was the hardest 3 months of my life. And it was doing the hard work, though, and finally getting to that point in my life where I was like, okay, I've got to figure this thing out, because if I don't, I'm going to be a bigger train wreck. And I'm going to leave a legacy that I'm not going to be proud of with both my wife and my kids. So I started going to seeing a counselor in the midst of all that hard work, that hard, deep, emotional. I couldn't even say the word dad without just weeping in the counseling session.
What were some of the big points in that deep work? What were some like really standout points for you that were like, oh my God, I got to process this, because I'm fascinated by that process. So please go as deep as you feel comfortable.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the midst of those conversations, my counselor, which, before I go every week, and at the very beginning, even I told my wife, I was like, don't tell anybody I'm going to see a counselor. As a guy, it's that macho crap.
Yeah, there's stigma around it, right?
Yeah, we don't want to admit that we have issues, and it's a pride thing and a machismo deal, where it's like we set all that stuff down and we go find real help. That's where the real change comes, right? And so it was in those conversations, man. And I remember my counselor asking me, do you ever remember spending time with your father, quality time? And dude, I sat there for it seemed like forever. And I could not recall a memory of just me and my old man. And so as he started piecing things together and helping me realize I didn't get affirmed. I wasn't told I was a good kid, a good son. I was going to be a great man. I didn't get all those verbal affirmations that every young boy needs. In understanding that I really was suffering from abandonment. I was pissed off and couldn't understand how my dad could leave. How could he leave a family? 3 boys and a wife. And so that abandonment, coming to terms with just understanding that I had an abandonment issue, was really a big game changer for me. And again, even the betrayal. I felt like my father betrayed me. So all this anger was wrapped up in that towards my dad. I used to refer to my dad as a coward. Now, man, I feel nothing but compassion and love toward the guy, even though he's been dead for many, many years. But that was part of the process and some of the things that I learned.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. How did your brothers fare out of this? Because you have 2 older brothers. Where are they at in that journey of processing all of this?
It's interesting. We all kind of processed it differently.
I would assume so. I've heard this story.
Yeah.
One process, one.
Yeah, I was the guy medicating and hardcore alcohol. I'm not going to face this stuff. I'm mad at my dad. I could care less, but I love living as a victim, which is a common theme today in the world we live in. People love living as a victim. And I loved living in there because I could justify it in my behavior, right? My drinking, whatever. Oh, you don't know what I've been through. You've never walked a mile in my shoes, all that, blah, 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 blah. Right. I had to get out of that and realize I had to start taking responsibility for my actions. One of my brothers, really financially, he started kind of really just being very frugal financially, because my dad died with like 17 cents in his pocket, right? And so his thing was, I'm not going to be like my old man. I'm not going to be poor. And then my other brother kind of dealt with it in some of the similar ways I did. He didn't go to the alcohol, but he was very angry for a very long time, and also kind of dealt with the betrayal, but dealt with it in a different way. And I think he really just ignored it, wanted to pretend that it never happened, and then he was never impacted by the act of what my father did.
Yep. Repression, suppression, or aggression. So we usually process things.
Well, and it's really powerful to hear your version, just what was happening, what it felt like, what you were experiencing. Talk to us a little bit about what you share in your book and some of the ways that people can start, if they've been in that space, if they've got that father wound, they've had that abandonment, that they can start to move in the direction of healing.
Yeah, so I think a couple of different things. Probably the most important of all, and I've shared this many, many times, was me coming to this place of understanding this. And it's very simple, but it's a very, very strong, powerful statement. My dad could not give what he did not have.
Mm.
So let me repeat that. My dad could not give what he did not have because he grew up with no father. Had five father figures come through his life, no stable one. He just didn't know how to be a dad. And so for me, it was connecting the dots and understanding he couldn't give what he didn't have. He couldn't pass down to me what he didn't know or didn't have himself.
Yeah.
And so part of that in the forgiveness, though, that forgiveness, the anger disappeared. I was no longer this angry, ticked off guy that I think so many of us, again, I said, I've met many men and women that are angry and can't even tell you why, especially men. It seeps out into various places in our life, and in a lot of different places that we don't even realize, whether it's a relationship with a girl or a man or our wives or whatever, our relationship with our kids, the short temper fuse that we have with our kids because of a lot that needs to be unpacked and really thought through. I don't feel like I'm good enough to be a dad because I never got that affirmation. So then I lash out at my kids. I don't feel good enough to be a husband. So I lash out at my wife if she becomes critical of me. So there's a lot of different ways that it plays out. But in the book and in the movie, both, really, it's a message of hope and healing. It's about forgiveness and that life-changing power of forgiveness and what it did in my life and really giving me a second chance to be the man, husband, and father I was created to be. And I'm lucky that I got that second chance and my wife decided to stick around.
Talk to us about that. I mean, I'm interested. What you were saying really resonates with me because like Pam said, I grew up without a father and I grew up with a mother who had various psychological disorders. But she also had choices that she made. And there was a lot of physical and mental abuse that happened in my life. And she said, I did the best that I could. And that statement has always fried me because I'm like, no, you didn't. You could have done so much differently. I mean, nowadays we have Google and YouTube and there's a lot more information out there. It's a lot more publicly discussed about these situations, which I'm very glad. That's what we do here on the Rainbows in Real Life show. And just thinking about that, but I get pissed off at my mom sometimes, or I get agitated that people sit there and say like, I did the best I could, when the reality is, especially nowadays, that people don't have that excuse. I really don't believe they have that excuse. In your journey from where you've been and now being a dad yourself, walk us through that process with your kids and walk us through how you changed the cycle of what was going on and how you didn't. I know we already know the alcoholics part of it, but that breakthrough to become that dad that you are and to become on the mission here to help other dads. Talk to us about that journey.
Well, and I think one of the things that you mentioned, Christopher, is so important for people and men to understand, especially. We have so many resources now that we didn't have years ago. You got podcasts, you got books, you've got internet, just Googling stuff, how to be a better dad, right? And YouTube and all the different platforms we have. So you're right. There's really not a lot of excuse anymore when it comes to that piece of it. I think for some of our older parents, they didn't have those things. So they do. Some of what they say is true there. But at the end of the day, for me, it's about getting around older guys that have been there and done that, right? They've made all the mistakes. They've paid the dumb tax, right? So we don't have to pay it. And so it's learning from other guys that's real life, that are not going to sugarcoat it, that you can't get from a book even, that you can't even sometimes get from a podcast, but it's a band of brothers. There's another guy that's going to be real with you and call you idiot if you're doing something stupid, right? Or is going to hold you accountable when he sees you going off on your wife or your girlfriend, going, dude, what's going on here? There's something deeper here. You just don't do that normally, So it's really, that's what it's all about. It's a brotherhood of getting with other guys that can help walk you through that journey, and they're going to be real and honest with you about some of the stuff you're dealing with. With me, a lot of it's self-evaluation, man. I'm in this fatherhood space and I probably over-evaluate myself a lot. And I'm probably my world's the world's biggest critic of myself because I'm always thinking I could do things better. But it's walking in daily awareness, knowing that my temper, man, I get angry at my kids and go off. That makes it really difficult. That takes a lot of work to get that back, right? That trust back and all of those things. But practical applications, I'll tell you, one of the wow moments, many wow moments in making the movie was understanding Dr. Meg Meeker, who's a best-selling author, and just love her work and what she does with fathers and daughters. She said, you know, John, when you lose it with your daughter, you need to go have that private one-on-one conversation and say, I am so sorry. I was having a bad day, whatever. Be real with them as to why you lost it or why you messed up, but then ask them for forgiveness and say you're going to do the very best not to do that again, because it does a couple of different things. Shows them that you're human, that you're not perfect, because they're going to find it out anyway, right?
Yeah.
But secondly, it shows them also that that's not normal behavior. If you don't go up and say something to them, they're sitting up in the room going, wow, my old man just yelled at me, cursed at me, whatever, and he's not coming to walk through that and help me process and apologize. That must be normal. So then what happens next? Your kids start yelling at you. You start seeing your kids yell at other kids. It becomes their normal.
Yep.
And that's what people have to understand and realize. You're creating your normal as indifferent, bad, or good as that is. And I'll share a quick story. We interviewed a guy named Jose who was a prison inmate. And he said, you know, John, at 10, 11 years old, my mom would send me down the street to the bar to get my old man out of the bar. He'd be drunk. I'd drag him back home. And he said, I'd then watch my dad physically and verbally abuse my mom. And he said, when I turned 16, when I was a man, guess what I started doing? He said, I started physically and verbally abusing my mom. And I started drinking to get drunk all the time, because that's what I thought a real man did based on what I saw with my dad.
Oh, yeah. What she tolerated, what she put up with. Yep. Oh, boy. Don't even get me started with parents who put up with that stuff.
And I think that just really speaks to the level of just kind of obliviousness, not in a bad way, not in a negative way, but just that we aren't aware as we're growing up of what's actually transpiring, what we're absorbing as children and the programming that we're getting. And then all of a sudden we're in adulthood with these beliefs and programs that just don't serve us, and they don't serve the people around us. And so I love the point that you bring up, which is, you know, starting to evaluate yourself, you know, starting to be objective and look at your life and say, okay, there's some things here that I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing, or that I don't even want to be doing. And here's the effect that it's having. And to start to just have that not judgmental conversation with ourselves. I mean, I think that that's an important piece of this too, is acknowledging that we have to have some self-compassion and realize we're doing the best we can too, right? Like the people that have come before us, but to know that at the same time we can do better. And taking that initiative then to figure out, okay, what is that next step? What is that next thing? And so to that, I mean, I think that's why the message you're sharing is so powerful, because there's so many people out there, like you were saying. And I mean, I know you see them, you talk to them, that have come from this space of either an absent father, or like you said, a father that's there, but isn't participating, isn't engaged, or is teaching us the wrong things. And having the opportunity to say, you know what, that's not the end of the story. I can change it. It can be different with me and my family. It's such a powerful thing.
Yeah. And that's what if people hear nothing else, they need to hear this. You're not alone. It doesn't matter what your stuff is. Doesn't matter what your story is. Like, I'm a jacked up, flawed, and perfect guy to this day. You know, I don't have this father thing figured out. And anybody that says they do are lying. We're all on this journey, and motherhood too. And I know that's a big thing with women. They're always comparing themselves to other mothers and how they're lining up. And guys, we do the same thing. You know, we're comparing ourselves to other people, and that's the worst thing we can do. We're all on this journey trying to figure it out. And one of the things, you know, early on for me is I was convinced, until I came to this place and really started diving in, doing the hard work and forgiving my dad, I was convinced I was all alone and I was the only one struggling with this. I figured everybody else had this dad thing figured out. Everybody else was a husband and father and whatever, not realizing that's the biggest lie any of us can believe. None of us have this thing figured out.
Yeah.
And what's the worst thing you could do as a parent? As a parent, I've talked to a bunch of people who have had traumatic childhoods, and one of the things they warn parents about is not to try to overcompensate with your kid for your childhood. Like, for example, I wasn't loved, I wasn't hugged, I wasn't kissed, I wasn't told I love you. We didn't have affection in my house. So I find myself constantly hugging and kissing my son. Like, I love you, buddy. I love you. But I say that because I say that because I never know when my day is going to be done. So meaning when I'm going to pass on to my next journey. So I always tell people I love them. I might give them hugs. I mean, that's just the way I am. Talk to us about the psychology, if you know about this, and how some ways that we tend to try to do that and ways that we can prevent ourselves to do it. Maybe we don't see that we're doing it, how we can be more objective about that process and not screw our own kids up by trying to heal ourselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get that a lot. I talk to men especially all the time, and it's always their dad was, let's say he was an over-the-top disciplinarian who was always that angry, almost like the military style dad. So then they go to the extreme and are the total lenient, don't make their kids do anything, no discipline. It's like, whoa, hold on a second. There's a nice, comfortable middle ground there.
Right.
And you said it, we can't go extreme opposite of our parents because, I mean, ultimately, none of us are perfect. But in most cases, our parents probably did a few things right, even if it was just little bitty things right. So we can take bits and pieces from what they did right, and then bits and pieces from others that we see doing well in this parenting space or fathering, mothering space, and take bits and pieces from that. The other thing is finances. It's like, man, I explained this about like with my brother. My dad died poor. So then it's like extremely tightwad, frugal to the unhealthy, extent. So that then that breeds unhealthiness in a relationship with a wife or kids. I mean, the kid grows up and can't spend a penny on nothing because it was old man and his thing with his dad, right?
Right.
So there's so many different ways that plays out. We've got to be careful in finding the healthy middle ground in all of that and not having that idea that I'm going to do exact opposite of my dad because extreme either way is unhealthy.
So what are those steps? Because I know for me, and this is such a great point, I know for me that I will take a breath. I literally now breathe like in between trying to react to something because I'm like, he's a kid. I sit there and go, okay, he's 4 years old. This is how he's processing. I know the whole child development thing. And that's the thing that scares me the most is I know that conditioning process between 0 and 5 is so important. And in some respects, I'm tough and I explain to him and I talk to him and I have those things. But talk to us about ways that we as parents can watch out for that. If there is a way, or do we need to ask somebody outside of ourselves to say, our wives or somebody like, hey, if you see me doing this, let me know. Talk to us about that. And I'd be interested to know more. Does your brother has kids?
Yeah, my brother has 3 older boys, which are phenomenal. He ended up raising incredible young men. They're really good. He saw it early enough on where he dove in, I think, with a group of men and learned so much from other men about how to raise his young sons, right? But I think you hit it, on the head in that so many of us in dealing with this junk, with our stuff and what we deal with, like, for example, I'll give you, when my oldest was probably 9, she was doing something she shouldn't have been doing. And I remember just going off on her and saying, you know better than that. I can't believe, blah, blah, blah. Well, my wife pulls me aside. She said, John, she's 9. Does she really know better? We have these ideas that our kids should know better. And again, that's a psychological thing. They're a reflection of us. So a lot of times we get mad at them because we didn't do our job in being able to raise them not to make those mistakes, right? So point. It's a psychological thing that goes on. But I think you mentioned it. It really is take a deep breath, don't react emotionally right then and there. Say, hold on, you know what? I need 10 seconds or so. Let me, even take yourself out of that situation.
Oh, yeah, I do. I walk out of the room.
Yeah.
He's 4. He's 4. What's going on in a 4? I literally do this now. I'm like, what's going on in a 4-year-old's mind? The lights are coming on, and he's realizing that he can have anything he wants. He can grab this. He can grab this. He can grab that. Dad, oh, that. So he doesn't understand boundaries. So I'm like, okay, just because he comes in my office and touches every single thing and picks it up and, Dad, what's this? Dad, what's that? And then puts it down in another spot. I'm like, he's discovering, he's being curious. Do not squash that. So that's one thing. I'm like, there's certain very non-negotiables for me that I don't want to squash in my son. I want him to be the exact, whoever he's going to be. I want him to be that person wholeheartedly. I don't give anything. I want him to have a sense of adventure, a sense of curiosity, confidence, communication skills, manners. He's already got. I mean, he's really, really great with manners. He's really great with people. So yeah, I kind of worry about that opportunity. So yeah, I walk out and, what is he thinking? Not what am I thinking? Not what do I want? Not what my expectations are. But I'm doing that now. I sat down and talked to him about expectations. And I said, Daddy has an expectation that, this is your room. This is your room. So when we walk in here, we don't want to step on things because we might break them. And we don't want to break your toys, right? And he's like, oh, okay, Dad, I understand it. Instead of what I was walking in there 10 times going, come on, Jackson, pick up your room. Really? Come on. Pick up your room. Really? So those two different approaches I'm finding, getting them involved in that process. It's the same thing that I do in leadership. It's like the same exact thing. Go sit on his level, go mirror his body language, go talk to him in the way he talks, and find out a way that you can negotiate a win-win so he feels like that he's got the upper hand on the situation. That's all I've done is just taken what I do with people and just, okay, I got to switch it and I got to go into his mode. And it really does work.
Well, and I think you get it, dude. The fact that you got that he's coming in, touching and digging and doing whatever because he's a boy. He's discovering. He's exploring. He's doing all those things, right? It's just part of being a boy.
And this is Dad's area. He wants to be like his dad. Like, oh, he constantly puts on my glasses. It's funny. He puts on my bandanas now. It's cute.
But I think part of that too, and this was where I screwed up early on, is I'd be up in my office working, and my 2-year-old would come busting in the door. Well, I'd get mad and I'd yell downstairs, honey, you better get hit there and back downstairs. I can't believe, and I'd be stupid, right? And just whatever. When in reality, my 2-year-old has a attention span of 30 seconds maybe.
Yeah.
So let me crawl up in my lap and sit there for 20 seconds, and they're gonna be gone. They're whatever. So it's just a different awareness that we have to walk in every day so that we understand that, so that those moments when our kids are doing stuff that irritate us, we don't react, but we sit and think, okay, why is he doing that? Why is she doing it? Is she doing it but just to get your attention because you hadn't seen her in 2 days, or you haven't spent any quality time with her in 2 days? She just wants daddy. She just wants time with dad, right? Or him or whatever. So I think being able to process a little bit of that definitely is helpful.
I think that's such an important point. And also, I think we are now in this era where, of course, we have a lot more information, but we also have a lot more awareness around how important this topic really is. In the past, it was sort of like dads weren't even expected to be around. They were just supposed to go and, earn the living and come home and kick their feet up and watch TV and have a beer, right? I mean, it was just, that was like common in culture, and kids were like supposed to be seen and not heard. And tough love was, the order of the day. And now, we've learned and we've progressed a little bit, and we've realized, okay, that's really not the order of the day. That's really not necessarily going to work the way that we think it will or hope it might, right? And so to that point, though, I think that having that conditioning really requires that we do have support, that we do have a community, that we do have people around us that are not only kind of reminding us like, hey, buddy, that's probably not the best approach, but that also can, love us through the process and go, maybe have you tried this? Or maybe, have you considered doing that? And having those open conversations with people that we trust. So I'm curious, tell us about some of the resources that you know of, ways that men can find community and meet with other men and have that kind of conversation with people who are going to understand where they are as a father and how they want to progress.
Yeah, so I think, and Christopher mentioned it earlier, just real quick, to make sure we're understanding too, those that are closest to us, whether it's a wife or a girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, that they can also kind of hold us accountable, so that they can feel free to tell us, hey, you know what? I'm not sure the way you reacted to your son or daughter was healthy, right? And so being able to process it and walk through it with somebody, not be offended or take defense of it, is huge.
Yeah.
And so for me personally, it's being able to really tap in. And I mentioned this earlier with an older guy who, I'm 53, so I'm an old man as it is. But if I got that 65-year-old guy that is a few steps ahead of me, right? And that so many men were scared to death to go talk to other guys. But it's amazing, especially the older guys who have been there and done that. And you see doing a pretty good job as a dad and a husband. You just say, hey, man, can we grab coffee? Would you mentor me in this thing called life? Because I don't have a clue what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's the humility piece that all of us need to be working on and understanding it and being willing to ask for help, because there's so many other guys out there that would take the time. You just got to ask them. So being able to do some of those things and really just, again, the humility, let me put the pride down because I don't have this thing figured out. I need help. Can I have conversations with others that I know I can trust and that they're going to help me through this journey? And again, have been there and done that. It's very, very beneficial.
Awesome. Thank you for mentioning that. And one question I have for you is going to be kind of weird, but I'm interested in your take on this. I think a lot about legacy. I live my life every day based on my eulogy that I wrote, and it keeps me very centered. It keeps me very, very on track with things. It's funny because when you were talking about stuff, I actually coach. So I actually coach and I teach people about responding versus reacting. Another one I teach them about is, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? That's one thing I find as a parent, that we often want to be right. And sometimes it's like, whatever, it's spilling, have fun, let it be. I've noticed that I want him to be doing the things that I wanted that I do, but he's just a kid and he's going to figure it out anyway. But when you think about your life, and I know for me, I put it in context that when I pass away, I want my son, not to say I was perfect, but I want him to say certain things about my existence in his life. What is that for you and your kids? And when if you want to see your legacy, what would you want your kids to say about you as a dad and as a man?
Really simply for me, it's if I looked at what would be written on my gravestone, it would just be a good guy who did the best with what he had. Very simply, and not, again, not excusing that I really didn't strive. Here's the interesting thing: as men, we all want to be the very best CEO or janitor or coach or whatever, and yet in fatherhood and being a husband, we don't have that drive and determination. Why not? Where is that disconnect? If there's anything we should want to be phenomenal at, it's at being a dad and a husband, because your impact at home is going to be significantly more life-changing and generational impact than anything you do in your life. The stuff you do at work, nobody's going to remember your legacy at work. But you're going to have generations that remember your legacy as a father and husband.
So powerful. And I think, for many generations, men, again, their role was provide, right? The focus was making money. And now I think that we're coming to this awareness that life is so much more than that. And our legacies are so much more than that. I think that's such a powerful point, because it's one thing to leave some money to a child or to a spouse or whatever the situation may be, but to leave a legacy is something really powerful. And I love that your book and really a lot of what you talk about speaks to that. It really speaks to the humanity of, what does it mean to be a family? What does it mean to be a parent? And I love what you were just sharing, which is that is something that we have to get back in touch with. That is something as a society, really, we have to start to appreciate in a different way.
Well, and I think especially for men too, and I know this is what I've learned in the last 11 years. I was that guy that for 30 years pretended to be somebody I wasn't. And I was really good at it. I could manipulate people. I could do all these different things. And I was this poser and this fraud, trying to pretend to be somebody I wasn't, but I wanted to appear to be a certain way: successful, powerful, money, all that stuff, right? What I've learned in the last 11 years and where my key relationships have come is just being real, just being authentic and honest, and just being able to share my story. But here's the reality with guys. When I'm able to share with men's groups, when I share my junk, man, here's my stuff with alcoholism, depression, all the stuff I've dealt with. It's amazing. Their walls come down and they go, wow, I thought I was the only one.
Yeah.
Guy that he's struggling with it too. So it's like if we have more men doing that, that's where the real life change comes within the group of other men. And again, even with women. Now, women are a lot better at this than we men are. You know,
it's a little more second nature, maybe. Yes, for women.
Yeah, I get more women that reach out to me about their own stuff with their dads or their husbands and how that's impacting their kids and stuff than I do men. But men struggle in this pride thing. And again, we think we're supposed to know it all when it's okay. None of us know it all. We don't have all the kids. And it's okay to say, I don't know. There's nothing wrong with that.
And to know that your kids are, you know, they're not going to be perfect all the time either. They're going to make some mistakes too. So have some grace for your kids along the way. I mean, I think sometimes, you know, the frustration as parents that we have with ourselves ends up coming out on our kids. You know, we're really projecting on them a lot of that frustration and anger that does come out. And to have a sense of what that is and to know the difference between I'm angry and I'm just letting that out on them versus, okay, they really made a big mistake and we need to have a serious talk about this. And understanding that, you know, that those are two totally different dynamics. And the effect of the way that you respond in those situations is really important.
Yeah, the performance-based love is another one where I see, and it's incredibly destructive for so many families and dads that the kids come to know that dad only loves me if I perform well in the football field or in the choir concert, at the band or in the soccer field, whatever. Right. I've seen dads walk away from kids after a basketball game, just mad and angry. And you know they're going to get the butt chewing on the way home, on the car ride home, and you just kind of go, I want to grab the guy just around the neck and go, dude, do you understand what you're doing?
Yeah.
That you're doing? You know, and you're showing your kids, I only love you if you perform well. So that in itself is a whole nother thing to unpack that has consequences well beyond their lifetime. And so it's telling your kids that you love them, that you're proud of them, that you believe in them, not only in your words, but also showing them. It's going to their events. It's, you know, spending the dedicated time with them, date nights with your daughter and man time with your son. I mean, that's when our kids understand that we care about them, we love them. And your willingness also to have the difficult conversations with them, to talk about sex, alcohol, peer pressures, all of those things. When they know you're willing to have those conversations, even though they may be uncomfortable, they know you love them.
Well, and it's so interesting how, as you know, as parents, we're so focused on investing in our finances and our businesses, you know, and growing in those senses, but we don't think of investing in our kids. And yet, you know, what kind of relationship do we want to have with them 20, 30 years down the road? And how do we think we're going to have that relationship if we don't make an investment along the way?
Your child, your son or daughter, is not going to look back and remember how much money you had in the bank when she was 14, right?
Right.
That don't mean jack.
Exactly.
They're not going to care about the money. They're going to remember the times you spent with them, camping, fishing, whatever, even just hanging out in bed at night, right? Telling stories. And here's the other thing too, for all the fathers out there, I would encourage this. This was another one, many of the wow moments I learned when I was putting my girls down for bed. And they asked me what my first job was. And we were all three girls were in there. They were younger. And I started telling them about being the rat at Chuck E. Cheese and how I had a big head. And, you know, it was a nightmare of a job. And the day before, we made like 100 pizzas, me and one other guy. And I'm hot. And the kids are pulling my tail. And the head's so big, I can't really keep up with the kids. And it was just a nightmare. I mean, 3 hours later, I'm still telling them stories. Our kids want to know what we were like growing up, what our favorite ice cream was, who was our best friend. They want to hear stories. They want to know that we're more than just dad, right? And that we're human. And even more importantly, sharing our own struggles and stupid decisions and mistakes. Being able to share those things, there's a bond there that happens between, you know, dads and daughters and dads and sons that is so powerful. We're willing to do those things.
Love that.
Thank you for being here, man. I mean, I really appreciate everything that you've shared with us. I mean, it's so valuable and so important. Spending time with our kids and having that relationship with them and being transparent when we screw up. Like say, hey, man, I messed up. Daddy's not perfect. That's what I tell my son. He's like, you hurt my feelings, and I'm like, I am very, very sorry. I said I didn't intend to. I said, let me explain to you why I was doing this. And sometimes he gets it, sometimes he doesn't. Now that he's older and he's starting to understand more, I have him say it back to me. Because sometimes you guys, do you understand? He's like, and we don't ever usually in any conversation, go do that follow up. And I thought about how I teach adult staff communication skills, but I'm like, okay, tell daddy what you understand. And now he's a lot more patient. And he's like, you don't want me to ride without my helmet because I might hurt myself. But dad, I told you I'm not going to hurt myself. I'm like, I understand, buddy, but accidents are accidents because they're not on purpose. So we just want to make sure that is the communication is there, the love is there, the sincerity there, the transparency is there, because you're absolutely right that the only people remember how you made them feel. And that's one thing I have learned so much in my process. I was so concerned of how I looked, like you were saying, the judgment. I looked a certain way and I had all these certain things. And I've always been pretty much me, but I always had to be kind of like buffered because of who I am and the way I talk and everything. And to Marlene's point, the power of vulnerability. That is so crazy you posted that, Marlene, because last night, just very last night, I did a clubhouse room for about 2.5 hours. I called it men's group and I called it the power of vulnerability. And it was crazy. I did that for a couple of reasons. I wanted to see if I put men's group and power of vulnerability, I wanted to see if people were going to be diving in there to discuss this. And I kind of thought there would be a lot more people in there, but there wasn't. But with the conversation that we had, it was amazing. It was phenomenal. And there was so many insights. But one thing that I'm really encouraged about is through COVID, there has been we all know there's been a massive reset in every one of us. We thought, oh, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to stay normal and, all that other stuff. And, the universe went, hey, like a snow globe, like you mother effers, you guys got to get your S together. There. See, I didn't say anything like that. But I mean, it's just, that's the way I feel. And now there's this opportunity where people are doing that introspective research. People are asking questions. People are coming to me for coaching and saying, Chris, I see how you are. You're just being you. I've never been able to be me. How do I do that? Because I want to be me with my kids. I want to be me with my wife. I've built this persona. I built this, imposter syndrome kind of thing. So the power of vulnerability, yes, Marlene, is so powerful. And I think each one of us just need to be more like that. I mean, I know that I was never in that situation. I was telling stories last night, but now vulnerability, I don't even care. It's not a big deal. And to that fact, Brene Brown, the power of vulnerability, or the vulnerability talk that she does on Audible, it's like a 5-day thing. That particular thing opened my eyes up. My heart up to the power of vulnerability and just being real and saying, hey, man, like people sit there, Chris, it must be so nice to be you. You're always happy. You're always positive. You have all these da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, well, I worked my ass off for it. You can do it too. And then I started learning. I'm like, God, I don't want them to think I'm perfect. I'm like, no. And then I would start saying, well, let me just be honest with you. I actually struggle with depression. I actually struggle with ADHD on crack. So I lose my train of thought. I'm organized, but I'm not organized. And some days I'm not happy. Some days I'm very down on myself. Some days I circle the drain on what this is all for. But I know what the tools are. I know what the triggers are for me. So now I'm much better at being able to handle that. I'd recover much, much quicker. I don't spend 2 months in the hole. I spend 2 hours in a hole and go, okay, Chris, really? Let's go through all the steps that you give all your clients, and I do it all. Then I get out of it and I feel better. But yeah, thank you so much for being here and the work that you're doing, because it's massively important that we shift the direction, we shift the focus on all of this and it starts with us. I mean, I'm to the point now where I think that people should be licensed before they have kids, because to your point, it's like they have kids for all the wrong reasons. And what does it do? I mean, it sets forth a damaging process. But again, I think that we're all here for a certain reason, a certain journey. You've been on your journey to be the man that you are today. I've been on the journey to be the man I'm at today. Pam, you've been on the journey to be the woman you are today. So I don't fault it. I look at it as an opportunity to become stronger and to learn. So whatever happens with Jackson, I'm not going to look back and say, shoulda, coulda, woulda. I'm going to say, hey, listen, here, I learned something now. So thank you again for being here.
Brother, thanks for having me. Pam, thanks for having me too. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
It's such a joy to have you with us. I want to make sure people know how to find you and follow you. So I've got your website up here, thefathereffect.com. And then also you've got your free video on YouTube, which is called The Father Effect. And that's a 1-hour documentary, correct?
Yeah, it's 1 hour free. We just released it last Father's Day. 60 minutes free on YouTube. You can just search The Father Effect, and I'm at The Father Effect pretty much everywhere on social media.
Okay, perfect. I was going to say, I know you've got a big Twitter following, so they can find you on Twitter at The Father Effect. And you also have your book, The Father Effect, on Amazon, so they can find that there as well. So yes, absolutely second what Christopher has said. Just a joy to have you on. Such an important topic. And I'm so grateful for you being here and sharing your wisdom and your story with us. I think it's great when we hear people, say, oh, I've got this book and I've done this and that. But it's another thing when we hear someone's story and we hear their heart. And I know that you've really shared your heart with us tonight and been vulnerable. And there's so much in that. There's so much power, and it's such a gift to us and our audience. So thank you so much for that.
Hey, thanks for having me, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much. And to our audience, thank you all for being here. I know we had a great crew on with us tonight. I want to just say hi to Twain, Marlene, and Scott. Thank you for your comments this evening and participating in particular. But to the rest of you, as always, such a joy to be here with you. Any closing thoughts, Christopher?
Just to reiterate, a fantastic conversation, a conversation that we all need to be having. I know I'm holding my buddies accountable and how they're parenting. I'm talking to them, having candid conversations. So how do you handle this situation? What do you do in this situation to keep us all in check? I mean, I have one of my buddies, he swears by being a complete a-hole. He talks to his kids rough, and he's like, I don't care if they're my friend, they're going to respect me. So I love what you said about finding that middle. I mean, that's really what we have to do in anything in life. I mean, it's good to be a little adventurous. It's good to be a little crazy. It's good to be a little safe. It's good to have that balance in life, but to push ourselves out of that comfort zone to become who we can really become in this life. I mean, as we said at the start of it, there's Google and YouTube, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, if you have a situation, you have a problem. I know when my son is doing something, I come in here and go, why is my 4-year-old defying me? And then I'll sit there and I'll read for 4 hours and I'll learn. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm being the jerk. Okay. Oh, well, how do you discipline a 4-year-old? Is timeout? I've been studying timeout. Is timeout a really good idea? Go study these things. Your kids are the most important aspect of your journey, ladies and gentlemen. You are setting for the future generations of this world. Do not skip on that responsibility. I know I don't. I have sacrificed ego and money and fame and all this other stuff because once I found out that we were going to start trying to have a kid, and then when that didn't work, we started doing IVF and that didn't work, and then we started the adoption process, and then that journey took that. I put everything on hold because I wanted to make sure that I was not going to be a distant father. I was going to be a father that was going to be there. If I was going to make this commitment, which I was not going to do earlier in life, I was going to make this commitment that I was going to do it to the best of my ability, understanding that I would not be perfect and I would make mistakes, but that he would turn out, he'd have a lot better chance at survival and thrival in this life than it took me 50 some odd years to be able to do. So again, I just welcome each and every one of you that if you're watching this live or on the replay, engage with us, leave us your questions and connect with our guests, and make sure that you guys are here every other Thursday night at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we can bring you rainbows and real life. I am Christopher Rausch.
Thank you. And thank you again all for being here with us. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. We look forward to seeing you next week. Good night, everyone.